Alex Neil.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think in the earlier remarks Dr Marchant referred to a board meeting on the 31st of October that first considered reinstatement of the Chief Constable. Is that correct?
No, not reinstatement. That was discussing the continuation of a leave of absence.
Right. Okay, so for the board meeting and the agenda for the 7th of November, we've heard that this vital item was taken under AOCB, but were the board members informed that there would be tabled at that meeting a proposal to reinstate the Chief Constable? Were they given advance notice that that specific proposal was on the agenda?
I don't have, I can't recollect whether that is or is not the case. I, as the Deputy Chair, had discussions with the Chair and was aware of it. I don't have records to show whether or not other board members were or were not aware of what the discussion was going to be on the 7th of November.
But you're the Deputy Chair of this organisation, and you're telling me the most vital decision you've had to make in months, if not years, you cannot recall if board members were informed of in advance of the meeting that there would be a proposal tabled to reinstate the Chief Constable. Are you being serious? Are you seriously expecting me to believe that you don't know that?
What I'm actually saying is I don't know if there was a formal communication to the other board members on the 31st of October meeting. The discussion posed around the discussion. Sorry, I'm just trying to be very careful with the words I'm using. Apologies. The discussion on the 31st of October was regarding the continuing leave of absence, and we also always discussed the welfare issues of complainers and complainees. At that discussion, then there was the discussion around, as Mr Flanagan had referred to, the NPCC, the redeployment opportunity, and there was a discussion then regarding what information we required in order to make a more informed decision regarding that and continuation of the leave of absence. So yes, there was an expectation that this would then be brought back to a future meeting, and that meeting would have been the 7th of November.
To a future meeting? But were board members not told that it was to that meeting 8 days later?
Sorry, yes, they were advised that it was at that meeting on the 7th of November.
It was to be tabled?
Yes.
And
that the responses to the questions that had been posed would come back to the meeting on the 7th of November.
So can I ask, was the Chief Constable given any advance notice that this was to be discussed on the 7th of November meeting?
I think it's the Chair.
He wasn't given precise details of when the board would come to a conclusion, but at the earlier meeting I had been asked to seek the Chief Constable's position and whether or not he was open to returning to work.
But was the Chief Constable told that this proposal would be or might be tabled at the 7th of November meeting?
Not the details of the 7th of December, but that
November.
November. But we wanted his views on whether or not he was willing to return to work, so he would have been aware that we were discussing and considering that issue.
So the Chief Constable was aware, the Acting Chief Constable wasn't aware, PIRT wasn't aware, and the Cabinet Secretary wasn't aware. And we're not absolutely sure even the board members were aware we were going to be discussing this on the 7th of November.
I believe that all the board members were aware that they were going to discuss this on the 7th. All of the board members knew that we had to arrive at a decision either to extend the leave or return the Chief Constable to work. So there was no doubt or dubiety in the minds of the board members about what the discussion was going to be.
So how many board members were there at that time? I know there's been recent recruitments to the board, but how many people were entitled to turn up as board members on the 7th of November?
11, I think.
And how many turned up?
Well, from the minutes, there was 2 apologies, so it was 9.
And right? What's the quorum?
It's a majority of those present.
that can't be the quorum, a majority of those present. I mean, if two folk turn up...
Sorry, yes. A quorum is 6, I think.
So it was quorum.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So after the meeting, obviously the Chief Constable was informed. At what stage was the Chief Constable informed of the decision of the board to invite him back to start work again on the Friday?
I think on the Wednesday he was in.
So he was told on the Wednesday.
Yes.
Was that before or after you had your conversation with the acting Chief Constable, Ian Livingston?
No, I didn't have a conversation with the DCC designate until the Thursday.
Right. Well, Mr. Livingston gave evidence to the Justice Committee on Tuesday, and what he says is, I had no conversations with the Cabinet Secretary. I had some communication with the then Chair of the SBA on the evening of Tuesday the 7th of November, the day of the board meeting. I asked Andrew Flanagan for an update on the police authority's meeting. I knew there had been a meeting and I felt it was important to get that update because I had a responsibility to the men and women, officers and staff within Police Scotland should there be a change in Phil Gormley's circumstances. I did not get a reply to that, and on the Wednesday I was told that, this is by you, on the Wednesday, not the Thursday, that, quote, deliberations were ongoing. Is that correct?
Well, as I said, for me, the first step was to advise the Cabinet Secretary. I would then have spoken to the DCC designate.
Well, would it not therefore have been more appropriate and more accurate to have said to the acting Chief Constable when he asked you on the Wednesday morning, I need to speak to the Cabinet Secretary first and then I will contact you as the acting Chief Constable?
Perhaps
I mean, to say deliberations were ongoing at that stage.
Well, I hadn't spoken to the Chief Constable at that point to confirm that he would return.
So the sequence on the Wednesday, you said you hadn't spoken to Ian Livingston till the Thursday. Ian Livingston says you spoke to him on the Wednesday. So do you now accept it was a Wednesday you spoke to Ian Livingston?
I accept that, yeah.
So what was the sequence? Did you speak to Phil Gormley before you spoke to Ian Livingston, or did you speak to Ian Livingston before you spoke to Phil Gormley? I'll bet you don't remember.
Well, I don't remember in which order.
There's a surprise. You don't remember. The amnesia that's around the Scottish Police Authority is beyond belief. We had that the last time, about 9 months ago. So basically, what basically the acting Chief Constable is saying, Mr. Flanagan, is, in words of one syllable, you lied to him.
No, I don't think I did.
Well, that's what he's implying.
I didn't have a firm conclusion at that point.
But deliberations weren't ongoing at the board. The board had taken a decision. Surely the honest thing to do would have been to say to the acting Chief Constable, who's responsible, as he quite rightly says, for the welfare of all those who work in Police Scotland at that time, to tell him that I can't tell you at the moment what the decision is until I've spoken to the Chief Constable, Mr. Gormley, and to the Cabinet Secretary, but I'll ring you back in the afternoon once I've done that. Surely that would have been the professional way to handle that.
I don't recall the details of the call. I thought it best to advise the Cabinet Secretary first, and in the event that turned out to be a wise decision.
So when did you ask for a meeting with the Cabinet Secretary?
I think it was asked for on the Wednesday, but it actually was set for the Thursday morning because I was going to be through in Edinburgh for the committee meeting.
Yeah. You didn't think it was important enough to inform the Cabinet Secretary on the Tuesday evening or sometime on the Wednesday of what the board's decision had been?
Well, the last time I had met with the Cabinet Secretary, we had talked about the Chief Constable's situation. There was no indication that this was going to be a significant issue.
Well, obviously I wasn't party to that, I can't answer that, but by the time you spoke to the Cabinet Secretary, is it not the case the Chief Constable, Mr. Gormley, had already left his home in Norwich and was driving to Scotland?
I don't know the Chief Constable's travel arrangements, sorry.
But you do know that he had to turn back.
He was expected
in the middle of his journey.
I saw that reported in the press, but I don't know the details of that. I know that
so when you spoke to
expected.
Mr. Gormley, he wasn't in his car?
I don't know whether he was in his car or not.
But Mr. Gormley's lawyers, I think, have confirmed that he had to turn back because he was already on his way. So he was already on his way to Scotland to take up his duties the next day before you told the Cabinet Secretary, and you hadn't even by then told the Acting Chief Constable, let alone Perk. Is it not the case that in his previous expressions of concern about governance in the Scottish Police Authority, that the Chief Inspector of the Constabulary had already advised the Scottish Police Authority that it had to improve its governance around these matters?
There were some recommendations from HMICS, and I believe they were implemented.
Well, those recommendations not including that in circumstances like this, there has to be, before any final decision is taken, before, not after the decision is taken, appropriate consideration has to be given in discussions with the PERC in relation to the welfare of those who work in Police Scotland and other appropriate stakeholders consulted.
Don't recall any recommendations of that nature on this.
So you're saying the inspector had never made such recommendations?
The last time, I believe there were recommendations from the HMICS was in the transparency review in June and the forensics review around the same time. There was no comment from HMICS that I recall on particular issues around the return of the Chief Constable.
Is it not the case that a previous private board meeting the inspector had made these comments and had followed them up by email?
I don't remember that.
Can I just also, you mentioned this morning, you made reference to, when the Chief Constable came back, you made a fleeting reference to work for the National Police Chief Council, which I believe is a UK body.
Yes.
So can you clarify, which seems, again, to contradict what's in the press release that SPA were going to release on the Chief Constable's reinstatement, where it says he'll be returning to operational duties, implication being operational duties at Police Scotland. Can you clarify, what was he returning to? Was he going to be returning full-time to operational duties in Police Scotland? And what's the reference to the National Police Chief Council? What's that all about?
We were asked in early October, mid-October, round about that time, whether or not we would agree to the Chief Constable going to do work on a specific project for the NPCC. When the Chief Executive was asked to explore what that was about and what that meant, and it turned out to be a full-time involvement over a 9-month period. And we did not think that that was appropriate for the Chief Constable.
So to be clear, if he was returning, he was going to be returning to full operational duties, yes, full-time with Police Scotland?
Yes, okay. Because we didn't believe that it was appropriate for the Chief Constable to be paid for his normal role, but then conducting work on behalf of the NPCC. But it indicated to us that therefore meant that he felt that he was fit and able to do a full-time job.
Can I just finally, because I think I'm running out of time from the convener, ask a final question to both Dr. Marchant and Mr. Hume? You're both non-executive directors of the SPA board. Over the last 9 months, we've heard what a pantomime it is and the poor governance. We've had the auditor's report, and we've had crisis after crisis. We've heard this morning how you all come unprepared to this meeting, can't answer basic questions. You haven't brought your notes, you haven't brought your minutes, you don't seem to be well prepared at all. Is it not time for you two, as well as some of the other non-executive directors who have been part of this pantomime, to fall on their sword?
Dr. Marchant.
We listened to input from yourselves and obviously from HMICS, and as a personal individual, I take that input very seriously. And
you can't be proud of this record. I mean, the non-executives have utterly failed in their duty. Utterly failed in their duty. You can't be proud of that record, are you?
My view is that there are always areas of improvement on both the governance and and the processes. We continue to strive to improve. We accept the findings of HMICS and Audit Scotland's reports.
David Hume. I agree with the comments that Nicola Marchant has made. There are improvements, and if you read the annual audit report and the Section 22 report, you will see in their acknowledgement that improvements are being made. And I know from those areas that I'm involved in that there are obvious improvements. And with the movement into the new chair taking post and the new chief officers taking post, I think these improvements will continue. I don't accept in whole what you're saying. Some things have been said this morning that I don't recognise in terms of how the board went about its business. We took this matter extremely seriously. We knew, because of the 4-week cycle of the renewal of this leave of absence, that the board had to take a decision. And we knew on the 31st of October that we'd be coming back to a convened meeting on the 7th of November. That meeting was duly called and held. We had the principal advisor to the board in the form of the Chief Executive there. There were no proposals tabled at that meeting. It was the same issue that we had talked about in previous 4 weekly meetings, which was, does the Chief Constable's leave of absence continue? As always, we very thoroughly went through a number of basic considerations that allowed us to take that view. We always talked about the welfare arrangements for the other members of staff and the Chief Constable. We had directed the Chief Executive to consult with the PERC because in terms of the options that we were facing, we could continue the Chief Constable's leave of absence, we could move to suspension, or he could return to work. And in making those judgments, we were mindful of the regulations that set out the criteria for suspension, and that's why we directed the Chief Executive to stay in contact with PERC so that we would have a view about any potential interference with the investigation, because that is one of the 2 criteria for suspension. The other criterion is in relation to the public interest, whether there would be a public interest driver for suspension. So at the meeting on the 7th of November, there was no proposal tabled. There was a recognition that we had, by dint of that timetable, to make a decision about the position of the Chief Constable. Again, we reflected on the welfare arrangements. Again, we reflected on the view from the Chief Executive Officer about the role of PERC. At that time...
Sorry to interrupt you, but you say there was no proposal tabled to reinstate the Chief Constable. Have I taken you correctly?
Well, as I understand what that phrase means, there was no proposal. We didn't go into that meeting aware, or I don't think anybody had reached that decision point. So
how did that, in the meeting then, how did that proposal come about?
Well, sorry to repeat myself, but the context for the meeting was the 4-weekly review, and we knew we had to come to a view. The options in front of us were clear. The options were, under the terms of the regulations...
You've gone through all of that.
Yeah.
How did I mean, presumably you had legal advice at this board meeting, had you?
We didn't have legal advice, but we had previously on these issues when previous...
No, but you're
reviews.
considering these options clearly. Anyway, leaving aside the absence of legal advice, who proposed the reinstatement of the Chief Constable?
It was a consensus of the board, having gone through the
somebody
process.
Somebody had to say, surely, I propose. I mean, if you're taking a decision at any board meeting, and I've been in a lot of boards, somebody has to propose the reinstatement, that there's 3 options, and somebody surely has to say at some point, I propose that we go for that option, reinstatement to the Chief Constable.
There was a discussion about the feedback through John Foley from PERC. there was a discussion about the public interest matter. We were aware of the discussion. No, we were aware of the discussion you have just had about the MPCC. Certainly, as a board member, I felt in that meeting I had got to the point of thinking the conditions for suspension were not met. The Chief Constable had declared that the reason that he wanted leave had ended, and I felt that on the basis that we talked about with the MPCC, it was in the public interest. I felt I couldn't justify a continuation of special leave when he ought to be back at work.
I need to wind up, but just for the record, in writing we have it from PERT. They were not consulted about the reinstatement proposal.
I'm sorry, I can only tell you what I expected at that meeting.
So you were told they had been consulted?
No, can I come in there? I think that you're absolutely correct, Mr. Neil. I certainly didn't consult with the PERC in relation to that. My recollection of what happened at the meeting where that decision was taken is that I was going on leave 2 days later. So I took an action from the meeting to write the letter to the Chief Constable, which I did, and I know you've got a copy of that. But my recollection of actions was that the Chair was to communicate with the PERC as well as the Cabinet Secretary and the Chief Constable. But I was to maintain regular contact with the PERC, which I always did.
Yeah, but surely the sequence was important as well. I mean, surely when there's any investigation going on anywhere of a disciplinary nature and you're talking about reinstatement, the first thing you would do, I would have thought, is check with the view of the person investigating the complaints about whether it was appropriate for the person to be reinstated at that stage. PERC have said no such consultation took place.
That's correct.
That's damning as well as correct.